I would like now to introduce the Bros and Bells Handbell Choir and Miss Winnie Stripley.
Thank you. While we're not sure how communication traveled following the armistice, we can imagine that when the word came to all the towns and villages throughout our allies, that a bell probably sounded, and maybe several, from the bell towers or a carillon. Here in the U.S., following World War I, many bell towers and carillons were constructed to remember those that were lost in World War I. Bros and Bells would like to present our version of what those bells might have sounded like.
Sorry about this. I thought she was going to play a lot.
Introduce Ms. Beverly Lane, curator of the Museum of San Ramon Valley.
Thank you all for being here. 100 years ago, this valley was farmland and ranch land. And we had all kinds of crops here, not the ones we remember, but almonds, fruit trees, many kinds of tomatoes, and then finally walnuts. And in the ranches, we had cattle grazing and sheep grazing, a very different place than we have today. Hartz Avenue was just starting to be the new downtown in 1918, and this corner of Hartz and Prospect was the heart of that downtown. Coming down Hartz was an electric trolley which came through town and curved out to the brand new Mount Diablo Country Club. And not far from that was our second mass transit, the Southern Pacific's steam railroad. So when war was declared in April of 1917, probably about 20 of our farm boys answered that call. They were young. They were eager for new experiences. This would take them initially to Camp Lewis in Washington and Camp Kearney near San Diego. And as with troops in Europe, when they initially felt the call of duty, they were ready and willing to go. But it was a war, and it was a devastating war, with new weapons, poison gas used for the first time. And I think they came back full of these new experiences and some maturity, which they perhaps could have done without. Then, in 1918, 1919, the pandemic flu arrived, and it was most devastating for young people and young, healthy people. So when we look at what happened with the 5 local farm boys who did not return, they were touched by that pandemic. So what I'm going to do now is name and say a word about each boy and ask that the bell be rung once. Are you ready? Okay, first, Peter Byers. Peter Byers was a farm boy from Tassajara Valley, and he died on the Western Front in September 1918. Peter Byers. Then Simeon Anderson, who came from Ramon, with some of those immigrant Scandinavian Andersons, died as well in September 1918 on the Western Front. Simeon Anderson. Our third young man was George Freitas. He was a little bit older. He was 29 when he was returning from Europe on a ship, and he caught the flu, which went into a pretty vicious pneumonia, and he died on board the ship returning to America. George Freitas. William Peterson was our fourth boy. He had not departed for Europe yet. He was in a camp in New York. He caught the measles, and then he went into a hospital, caught the flu, had pneumonia, and he passed away in New York. William Peterson. Our final farm boy was Lloyd Wood. He was a nephew to the Baldwins who lived in Danville, and he was from Ramon. He had a terrible experience in the war in Europe, being buried for 24 hours before he was discovered with many wounds. And they brought him back to Letterman Hospital in San Francisco, where people locally were regularly visiting him and very optimistic for his recovery. However, he got a blood infection and passed away in 1919. Lloyd Wood. I thank you all for coming and for recognizing our 5 Liberty boys who gave their all during World War I.
I'd like to point out to the crowd one of our members present right now, Miss Roberta Morris. Her grandfather was a World War I vet. She was a longtime member of this community, is a longtime member of this community, and a real supporter of all the civic programs here. Please chat with her later on and share reminiscent stories. That's her grandfather's military cover that she's wearing.
No, it's my father.
Your father's man, yes ma'am.
And we opened the World War I exhibit at the San Ramon Valley Museum in 1917.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Our next event is a poetry reading by Mr. Eric Fraser Hayes again, please.
This poem, if you can go back for a moment to the moment where the artillery ceased and people got to climb out of the trenches for the first time. Everyone sang by Siegfried Sassoon. Everyone suddenly burst out singing, and I was filled with such delight, as prison birds might find in freedom, winging wildly across the white orchards and dark green fields, on, and out of sight. Everyone's voice was suddenly lifted, and beauty came like the setting sun. My heart was shaken with tears, and horror drifted away. Oh, but every one was a bird, and the song was wordless. The singing will never be done.
I would like you now to stand while we play taps one last time as we come to the close of our ceremonies today. Bugler? Ladies and gentlemen, before you go, please take a few extra minutes to come inside. Look at the displays that have been put together. Many of the exhibits have been brought in by individuals and families, stuff they've had in their house, in the attic, in the boxes that they bring out every once in a while. And we certainly encourage you. If we don't tell the story of our families, no one else will. And it's one of our responsibilities. And yet again, we are still struck by the fact that the town of Danville, the community of Danville, the people of Danville, do it right and manage to say the right things and mean the right things at the appropriate times. Please don't forget the services over at the high school tomorrow, and enjoy the rest of your day and get home safely. Thank you very much. The event tomorrow at the high school